Okay, hi. I'm Holland, and this is Assessment Task 2, Folio 1 for IOL. My project name is The Signal, a project that I planned out in PPP in 2020. The storyboards and concept art I will reference in this video is from that class, but all of the animations I'll be showing are new, or referenced from other people's animation. I have a lot of intentions for this work, which are in themselves evolving through iterations in both research methods and IOL this semester. In week 1, I largely primed myself to start looking into what kinds of movement my work would contain, and as of week 5, I have a much stronger sense of that now. In week 2, I focused on incorporating notes from my meeting with Nick, and began doing my own animation experiments, attempting to be looser, less detail-oriented, and more focused on how different movements make me feel. In weeks 2, 3, and 4, I kept these experiments surrounding human characters, but in the process of making this video, I have done more shape and weight-based experiments. In week 4, focused on sound, I took audio from a short that makes me feel really uneasy and tried to match its tone with my own animation. The animation itself was not that good and didn't turn out how I wanted, but I accidentally created a very neat editing effect that I intend on recreating in the short, and helped inform my research direction in both research methods and IOL. As of week 4, my refined intention now is to, quote, play with, disrupt, and corrupt the relationship between viewer and creator by playing with the psychological principles behind persistence of vision theory. In essence, I want to take the trusting relationship between the frames that I create and the frames that the audience interprets, and exploit that relationship to create eeriness and fear in my audience. In this video, I've taken my narrative so far, considered many of its significant movements and moments, and tracked down the most comparable pieces of animation that I think encapsulate my vision, including the most useful animation tests that I've done so far this semester. So picture this. A hot alien planet covered in mushroomoid rock structures. The color, light, and absence of sound feel stingingly hot. The background of our shot contains a new spaceship, attached to an old broken-down spaceship. The former is drifting gently in the absence of good anchorage to the latter. Its slow and consistent movement evokes calm. Around it, small robots move in synchronized manner. The multiple points of consistent and angular movements on screen give the sense of planning and organization, but don't move fast enough to create a sense of energy in the viewer. Some routine operation is happening. From the distance, we can see 2 astronauts that are repairing the old spaceship, with similar automated movement themselves, in robotic suits. Cut to a lone astronaut doing checks on a line of huge, ear syringe-shaped robots, wiping away a layer of orange dust and scanning something on each one. Like the others, her movements are repetitive, but with a human inconsistency and an air of boredom. The flat camera angle reflects this. These robots move like the others at the pointed end, but the weight on the top half carries over and bobbles slowly like a balloon. We get the impression that these faceless robots, who can't even line up straight, are kind of bumbling. Their movement is big, stupid, and kind of cute in a way. A light comes on the protagonist's helmet, indicating that water has been found, and she turns with motivation. There's a sense of energy to her suddenly, that even she wasn't really expecting. She jumps down the stone pillars to follow the source of the signal. Her jumps are nimble and point-footed, evoking curiosity, and then growing more planned and authoritative as she navigates downwards, which is to say faster and with less curved movements. She's small on screen, but her jumps aren't distractingly cute like the robots. We're keenly aware of how huge this landscape is relative to its human occupants. She sees one of the bumbling robots at the entrance to a massive cave. As she approaches and drops into the cave, everything slows down and we take in the new location. Her body movements are minimal, not distracting. She just sort of falls down into the cave. Her helmet movements move enough to illuminate different parts, slowly and minimally as we take everything in. She finds some water along a wall, droplets that don't move until she pushes them. They drift slowly in tiny, pretty particles. There is something kind of enchanting about them. But as she handles the water, it grows blobbier, more bulbous, and has a sort of silly energy about it. It starts waving around without motivation from her. It then starts making motivated movements of its own. It transforms into the shape of a child and playfully runs away. Fascinated, she follows the creature and grows more and more lost. The speed of the chasing characters and the camera turns more erratic, and the angles of the movement feel more random from shot to shot. More and more droplets of water join the fray. We're feeling a chaotic, childlike, even cartoony energy from this movement. The childlike shape leads her into a cavern, running along the surface of a massive, placid pool of water before disappearing into it. The water rushing past her ankles drags her inside. At the center of the cavern, a man-like shape begins to form, its growing volume dragging the water of the cavern towards it, her entangled feet included. Its movement is massive and coordinated, but elegant and swirling in a mystical way. Hypnotized, she stares up at the figure as they come face to face. It gently reaches out and strokes the side of her helmet. The core of its arm moves softly and tenderly, while a blanket of water rushes off of it and back up into its body. Completely entranced, she closes her eyes and sinks downwards. As her feet are about to hit the water, we jump cut to her back on earth and her feet hitting the dirt of her backyard. The huge standing figure turns into her husband, and the returning running figure of a child morphs in a fade into her son. We see her house back home and hear the wind rushing through the trees and the wind chimes. The son's running is childish and gleeful, but there's something slightly off about his run. She doesn't seem to notice, and the audience may consider this strange inconsistency an animation mistake and overlook it. The father and the son are both off in some way, though. The way they transition from one pose to another feels slightly strange, and their body parts move very independently and inconsistently. But our astronaut is too entranced, or maybe even just happy to see her family, to care. As the astronaut begins to run out of oxygen, the editing grows more erratic, cutting from her son to her husband, the house, the forest, running water, internal shots of the cave. We hear her breathing picking up. Her husband strokes her face, but his hand crashes into water on the side of her helmet. She motions that she needs air, and her husband's hands help to unlock her helmet. The erratic cutting continues as we cut back and forth from the dream to the real world. As she finally feels her husband's hands on her face, the illusion shatters, and she wakes up. She realizes what has happened too late, and the creature swarms around her. As the creature tries to smother the life out of her, the light on her drifting helmet reveals the remains of other astronauts who have died in this cavern. The creature's weight shifts from light to heavy as it slams her around the cavern as she tries to get her helmet back on. She manages to grab her helmet between both feet and narrowly escapes the cavern. The editing turns shaky and chaotic as we see her trying to get out of the cave alive. She manages to find the exit and crawls to safety, using almost all of her remaining oxygen. As she grabs onto the robot and tells it to take her back to the ship, the remaining drops of water rush off of her helmet, giving the impression of cold, open air, even in the absence of wind. She returns to the ship and starts to pass out, the two other astronauts rushing to her side and putting her on an oxygen tank. The camera is a shaky God's eye view. As they hook her up to the ventilator, they see the signal on her helmet as the creature approaches the ship and happily go to investigate. She tries to warn them, but passes out before she can.